Nice, doggy. You're a big one, aren't you? You dog or a horse, huh?
It's not a horse. It's a German Shepherd.
The original title of this video was going to be something to the effect of, is it possible to love a bad movie? And I was going to trash this movie while pointing out how I find it really enjoyable anyway. But then upon rewatching it and paying close attention, I came to realize it's much better than I gave it credit for, and I can't call it bad. So to put it simply, Bad Moon is a werewolf movie where the dog is the hero. That is the easy way to describe the plot, and really all you need to hear. The first time I watched this movie was at a movie night. I already had several cider balls in me, and when the dog, Thor, runs up the stairs to attack the werewolf, I fist pumped and shouted, "Yeah, fuck him up!" This movie has 2 dog versus werewolf fights, which is 2 more than I thought existed in the world. The plot is a showdown between Thor, a German Shepherd, and Uncle Ted, who has returned home from the jungle after being attacked by a werewolf that killed his girlfriend and inflicted the curse of lycanthropy upon him. Thor's owner, Janet, and her son, Brett, are unaware of his condition, and it is up to Thor to defend them. Occasionally, the dog howls in pain, and it's like in Pokemon Origins when Charmander gets bitten and does a death scream. I showed my girlfriend this movie, and every time the dog was in peril, she covered her eyes and flinched a lot. She also cried when the dogs are killed in The Thing and Terminator 2, so, you know. If you really hate the idea of dogs in peril, then you should probably, not see this. Honestly, I just wanted to talk about this movie because I kind of love it, for all its flaws. It has a charm to it. There's a lot of positives to this movie. Thor is genuinely a really interesting character and emotes very well, and you understand his story perfectly. Thor is very protective of his family, or pack, and is willing to put himself in danger in order to protect them. So he was mostly played by 2 dogs. So there was a hero dog that did most of the acting called Primo, and then they had a female dog called Echo that could do shots involving lying down and being still, since Primo was still 6 months old and had puppy energy. They had a 3rd dog, which was a Russian attack dog, but they used it for a couple of the shots of the fight at the end for when it's attacking the werewolf. The movie does a good job of conveying what Thor is trying to do, what he is seeing, and what he is thinking. There are scenes where Thor is uncovering clues, or finds a werewolf victim. You can tell that he's piecing everything together and realizing that Uncle Ted is dangerous.
Come say hello to your Uncle Ted, Thor.
The dynamic between Ted and Thor is really fascinating. Thor almost immediately figures out that something is wrong after finding a body in the woods and doesn't trust Ted. After seeing his werewolf form, he makes it clear that he doesn't trust Ted and that he'll view him as a potential danger.
We're 2 of a kind, aren't we, old pal?
What'd you do? Spit in his elbow?
He knows an old dog when he sees one.
After this, he begins watching Ted closely. I also love that there is a scene where Thor sees the werewolf in the forest, sees that it's handcuffed to a tree and stuck there, and instead of dragging its owner there to be like, "Look, oh my god, there's a werewolf, look at it," instead of doing that, he's just like, look at the werewolf, and then his owner's like, "Come on, let's go inside," and he's like, "Oh, okay." It's really important that he shows it, but then the owner's like, "Come inside," and he's like, "Alright." Thor later finds Ted having handcuffed himself to a tree in an effort to stop himself from attacking others, and from this point on, Thor starts escalating things. He pisses on Ted's caravan. It's pretty funny. This scene here where Thor's trying to stop Ted from leaving his trailer is actually the director's favorite scene in the movie. It's really well done because you can tell what both characters are thinking even though they don't say anything out loud. It's the tension, it's the standoff. Eric Red compares it to a silent showdown in a western, and I can see where he's coming from. Ted wants to handcuff himself to a tree in the woods, while Thor doesn't want him out of his sight. So neither character is saying anything, but you can tell what they're both thinking. And both characters want to get completely different things to happen. They can't both get what they want, so one of them has to back down, and neither wants to be the one to do it. I actually really like this shot here. It's slowly shown that Ted is transformed but is on the loose. You see his pieces of clothing scattered about, and then you see the handcuffs not on the tree but just lying on the ground. So Thor and the audience already knows why that is a bad thing. If Ted isn't handcuffed to the tree, that means he's loose. So then it leads to that build-up where Thor has his first confrontation with Ted. It kind of ruins it by having this like goofy shot of the werewolf. And we've already seen one up close in like full body shots anyway, so it's not like a big reveal moment in the movie. It's just, oh, there's a werewolf again. If this was the first time you saw a werewolf in full body shot, it probably would have had significantly more impact. There's a lot of plot beats that you're used to seeing happening to a human, but it happens to a dog, making this a really fascinating watch. Thor even gets framed for something he didn't do, and gets taken away by animal control, allowing the villain to remain at large. It's like a cop movie or something, where like the bad guy gets on the loose and the hero is like trapped somewhere. Man, this is almost as sad as the saddest movie scene ever. Thor even has to bust out of doggy prison. This movie is a delight.
Oh, yes!
As a German Shepherd, Thor is basically the only dog that could realistically fight a werewolf.
I mean, Thor isn't exactly helpless, you know.
Chandler, how big is that dog?
Get this, he's 105 pounds.
Like maybe like a massive like Mastiff or Bull Arab could, maybe. I know my dog couldn't. Unlike some movie characters, Thor's goals are really simple. He just wants to protect his pack, his family, from danger and to be a good boy. In the end, he achieves both of these things, making his character arc stronger and more well thought out than Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. This movie has clever ideas and thought was clearly put into it in places, but there are also times where the movie turns into a dumb, cliche, by-the-books horror movie, and these are the bits where it becomes a whole lot less fascinating. Almost the very first scene is a sex scene, followed by a gruesome werewolf attack. Zero subtlety, zero build-up. Eric Red, the director, says in the commentary that he felt the movie should open with a bang. I'll just crawl over to my shotgun while my lady friend is devoured, really slowly. And then blow its fucking head off. I love this. There's clearly like a fan or something blowing everything around. It looks like a storm. It looks so fake and unreal that it wraps around again to being awesome. The bluntness of the conman character is amazing. He only exists in 2 scenes and is immediately set up to be a flopsy. He tries to trick Thor into biting him so that he can sue the humans.
All right. I've heard about enough Flopsy.
Who's Flopsy, Mom?
A Flopsy, Brett, is a con man who does things like throw himself in front of cars and pretend to get hit, or intentionally provoke people's dogs and pretend to get bitten.
That's just a con that he runs. He gets caught trying to do it, and he swears revenge.
Yeah? We ain't heard the last of this lady.
And then ages later in the movie, he shows up in the middle of the night, unannounced, with a plan to kill Thor. And then the werewolf comes behind him.
Nice doggy.
He hears really creepy growling and sees this massive shadow right in fucking front of him, and he totally thinks that it's Thor. And he slowly turns around like and then he sees the werewolf and is like, whoa. And then he gets his throat slashed and loses some of his fingies with one swipe of its claws. This character only exists in 2 scenes to be a douchebag and then get brutally killed by a werewolf. It's so blunt and dumb and in your face. It's like, you know, that's the thing with horror movies. You need to have like attack scenes so it's not just boring all the time. But typically you try to build up the characters who die so it's more of an impact on the audience. This is just, here's a douchebag. Alright, he's dead. It's better than the surveyor guy who's in the forest at night. I don't even know if he's a surveyor. He's just measuring trees. I don't know. This guy meets no other characters, and this is his only scene. You could literally cut this scene and the movie does not get changed at all. It's pretty disappointing. I mean, it's pretty cool when the werewolf bites his head open, but yeah. I'm pretty sure the scene where it climbs the trees was aping Alien. Fun fact, Eric Red was hired to make a script for Alien 3. It's really bad, even he admits it. The fact that the werewolf can climb very fast through the trees like the Predator is only really shown in this scene, and he doesn't do it again for the rest of the movie. It's never even shown climbing a tree, probably due to limitations on what the suit performer could do. Okay, there actually is one more part where the werewolf climbs trees. Thor finds a hiker's body up in a tree, but you don't see how it got there. For all we know, like, aliens put it there. I don't know. Also, the werewolf attacks Flopsy while people are in the house? How did they not hear the werewolf roaring? Oh, by the way, this movie has one of those dumb fake out "it's a dream" endings where it's like, you think everything's over, oh no, jump scare nightmare. Oh my god. This feels like something I wrote when I was 20. There's also this shot where the werewolf throws the dog into a light fixture. And it's so obviously like a puppet slowly flying through the air. Also, this is one of my big pet peeves in these sorts of movies. I always hate it when the villain grabs the hero and then instead of like crushing them in their hands, just throws him away. I see this a lot where it's like the big, brawny, slow bad guy. He just picks up the hero and throws him, but it's like, just break him. You're holding him. Break him! So this movie does have dumb, silly things in it and stuff you'd see in a cliche horror movie, but it's genuinely entertaining and earnest. These things don't seriously detract from the movie or make it a bad experience. And the doggy hero is like so likable that you can look past that sort of thing anyway. Ted has returned to America, and finding no medical cure for his condition, he tries love out of desperation, hoping that family love can overpower his lycanthropy.
She has invited me to stay with her. And perhaps if I spend time with her, with my family, this disease will go into remission. Medicine will not stave off this disease. But perhaps love, the restorative power of love, family love, will save me.
So he already has his handcuffs and clearly plans to use them, but doesn't until the night the tree surveyor is killed. I don't know. He uses them the following night, that's right. He uses them the following night, despite having been killing hikers and campers in the woods.
Police revealed today the shocking discovery of a fifth dead hiker in the woods near Timberline. The 5 men and women were mutilated by what authorities believe is a wild animal, possibly a grizzly bear.
I have to assume that he'd gotten the handcuffs like that morning, or he just forgot to use them. Then he tries using them the next night, but since Thor delays him, he doesn't get to the tree in time and he goes on the attack. But surely if he knows that he's a danger to everyone around him, wouldn't he just run past Thor? Or like try to run past Thor? Like if I knew I was about to turn into a monster and potentially kill my sister and nephew, I'd be like, oh, I gotta get past you, dog. I'm sorry. Like, I'd try to put their safety above my own. I know that's easier said than done, but you know, this is a movie. And then the first night he tries approaching the house and he gets frightened by security lights. And I'm like, why would he be frightened by that? Is that because he's like an animal and can't control himself and the lights frighten him? Or is it because he is still Michael Pare, he is still Ted, and he doesn't want his sister to see him? It's kind of vague. But he clarifies in his diary that he blacks out. That kind of implies that he has no memory of what he does when he transforms.
Had another blackout last night. Woke up in the woods.
He starts off trying to warn them not to go into the forest.
Thor thought he heard something in the woods. Anyway, I finally let him out. He ran out into the woods and he didn't come back.
Well, what do you think it was all about?
I don't know, really. I'm not that worried. Thor barks at practically anything.
I don't know, Janet. You know, big predators, they can travel a long distance if their habitat runs dry. And just because there hasn't been anything dangerous in this forest recently doesn't mean it's always going to be safe. If I were you, I wouldn't let Brett play out there for a while until...
So Ted meets with his family, and that's clearly like an important moment to him.
Marjorie's gone. Yeah, so now it's just me and... I'm a shadow.
He then kills the surveyor at night, and then with the police investigating and around his caravan, that's when he tries joining them again. So the confrontation he has with Thor begins when he has to stay at Thor's house. Well, it's not really Thor's house, but it's just funnier when I call it Thor's house. Then at night he sees Ted handcuffed to the tree. Then later on, Ted provokes Thor, leading him to be taken away by animal control. Ted seemingly wants this to happen and takes glee in Thor being gone, which clashes with his motives. It's worth pointing out that Ted is also throwing Thor under the bus, so Thor is being blamed for the attack on Flopsy and potentially the other people that were killed in the woods. There's this really funny little bit where Thor pisses on his caravan. and then when he gets Thor taken away by animal control, to get rid of him, he pisses on Thor's doghouse in revenge. And that's great. But again, it raises a further point. Like, at first he's like, oh, you gotta listen to your dog, sister. There could be a monster out there. And then it becomes, man, I have to get rid of this dog so it'll let me transform. Like, it's not a clear dividing line between when he's accepting the transformation, when he's still afraid of it. Maybe he wants Thor gone, so he'll stop interfering with his attempts to hide in the woods, but that's not made clear. Eventually, Janet finds Ted in the woods and confronts him. And this scene is kind of confusing and contradictory. So rather than act horrified or afraid for, like, her safety, he's gloating and bitter.
Playing Nancy Drew, are we, sis? I was just about to restrain myself. But now that you're already here, that might be somewhat pointless.
He briefly laments how his attempts to stave off his curses failed, but then he acts out some kind of bottled up hostility and aggression towards her. These are feelings that weren't really hinted at until this point.
Family love, Janet. I thought he could save me. I was wrong. I warned you. I told you I shouldn't be here, but you wouldn't let me go. You wanted to play big sister. You had to be right. You always have to be right, Janet, but this time you're wrong.
And despite being happy that Thor is gone earlier, now he's chastising Janet for sending Thor away. So it's like, are you happy he's gone or are you not?
You sent the dog to the pound, Janet. He was trying to protect you.
And then once his transformation begins to take effect, rather than black out, he's aware of what is happening, and he starts laughing about how he'll have to kill her to preserve his secret. And him being desperate to preserve his secret is also out of character.
Handcuffs. I was gonna use these on myself. They were supposed to keep people from finding out about my private affair. But you already know, don't you, sis? So handcuffs won't keep my little secret a secret any longer.
And were the handcuffs there to protect others, or to stop people from finding out his secret? There's no point where you realize the werewolf has taken over. He's just upset over becoming a werewolf, and then abruptly in the movie he's like embracing the idea of transforming. He's also really cold and distant at this dinner scene.
I'm sorry about your dog, son. Come here. Come here.
Now, whether that's because he's like, you know, embracing his werewolf nature while still human is not clear. He just sort of is this way now. At the end, he allows Thor to kill him. Thor has confronted him in the woods. Ted is very badly injured, and he decides to allow Thor to finish him off. Now, is this because he is in so much pain and his injuries have gotten to the point where he just wants it to end quickly? Is it because he is being selfish and doesn't want his secret to get out, so he'll rather die than be like a freak being studied by people? Or is he like concerned over potentially killing more people? That isn't made clear either. So the werewolf's motivation makes little sense. It's kind of confusing. Bad Moon has many objective failures. The movie's budget is $6 million and it was shot in 40 days, so it lacked the time and the money that other movies get. Low budget means it's limited locations, fake jungle graphic, and a fake jungle set. You could have set this somewhere nicer or like more achievable within the budget, or have the events be off screen. Like, he mentions going to doctors off screen. You could have had this be off screen. The jungle looks okay. It's not great, but it's pretty good for the budget. The shot of the jungle up ahead, that wasn't great. Of the cast, there's only 3 actors really. Michael Pare plays Ted, and he's pretty good at playing the vulnerability of the character while also being tough and threatening at times. So it's not just the same emotional state. At times he's like really concerned over what he could become. There's a scene where he calls his sister and is very clearly like emotional and relieved at the feeling of being close to someone who loved him, and his acting is great in that scene.
Yeah, you know, having you up here was really great, sis. It really lifted my spirits a lot. Family, sis. You know, it's everything.
So that stuff's great. But then Mason Gamble, who played Dennis the Menace once, and Mariel Hemingway, granddaughter of Ernest, aren't great. I'm not so much saying that they're bad actors, I'm saying that their characters are very thin and don't really have much to do. Like, they did basically all they really could with the material they were given. There's basically nothing to the world outside of the few repeating locations. You don't get to see, like, the town or, like, more of the world or, like, characters at their job or at school or something. It's very restricted to this same repeating locations. And the characters are very flat. They're very two-dimensional. Like, the main character mentions being a lawyer, but you don't really see her do any legal stuff other than point out Flopsy's scam. Like, that's really it. What little we learn about the characters outside the plot of the movie is told in clumsy exposition dumps like this one.
So, sis, how's it going at the new firm? Janeway and Samuels?
So far, so good. My caseload's a lot lighter than it was in the DA's office in Chicago. Pace is a lot easier. And frankly, I am so glad to be out of criminal litigation.
How you adjusting to small-town life, though?
Me like that. For Brett, it's not such an easy adjustment, though. He hasn't made any friends in the neighborhood. But Chicago's no place to raise kids. Out here, it's safe and peaceful.
You know, sis, I'm so proud of you. I really have to take my hat off to you. You're a full-time mom to Brett, and you still manage to work at the firm full-time. It's just great.
We never see the kids struggle with making friends. We never see Janet at her job. And there isn't even a mention of Brett's father, like, of why there's no dad around. Frankly, I'm shocked there wasn't a massive exposition dump about what happened to the dad, too. But yeah, I need to clarify something. All movies have scenes of exposition. Like, it's unavoidable, unless you want the movie to be, like, 12 years long. It's just very glaring that in this movie, there's a lot of things that take place off screen, and with the limited locations and the small cast, it's very clear that there's a lot that you're just not seeing. Exposition can be done really well, as seen here.
Father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
The transformation scene looks really bad, because it's this really awful morphing effect that even at the time was bad. The director's cut of this movie doesn't even add new scenes, it just gets rid of the worst of the morphing. The werewolf design's pretty good. It does resemble a large man with wolf elements instead of being like a more dog-like creature. Sometimes it is very clearly a man in a suit, which you can't really avoid in this. While the suit looks great when it's being still or posing, it looks much less convincing when it moves. Its swiping motions look restricted. This, and the way it ambles away, makes it look like the suit performer's having a tough time moving the costume. The jaws on the face move in very unconvincing fashion too. They open and close very quickly in a stop-start manner, which doesn't look like the way the jaws of a living creature would work. Compare this to scenes of Thor biting, and it's a stark contrast. There's also many shots where it's clear that during fight scenes and attack scenes, the werewolf's mouth just stays wide open, and it's pretty glaring once you notice it. But some of the shots where it's opening and closing its mouth actually do look really good, but there's also a lot of shots where it doesn't. And again, I blame time and budget on this. But then again, the deaths are awesome. So the movie does have flaws, but what can be done to fix them? A bigger budget would have gone a long way. You would have had more locations, more actors, more special effects sequences, and more elaborate special effects sequences. The other thing I'd change, if I could, was the way the script builds up. The movie as it is tries to have a build-up, but it falls short due to having the, as Eric Red calls it, the bang at the start of the script. Almost the very first thing we see is a big werewolf attack, and that kind of spoils what the werewolves are going to be like for the rest of the movie. If this scene here was the first time you ever saw the werewolf in the movie, it would have a lot more impact, because it's the first time you see it. Also, by that point you already know that Ted is a werewolf, because Thor finds him in the woods, so the reveal of him at the house is not that interesting or exciting. And if Ted's condition was kept more of a mystery, then this would be the first time you get confirmation that Ted is a werewolf, so it would also be a plot twist. You could have scenes showing Janet at her job and even have the Flopsy be a client of hers or someone she's prosecuting against. You could see Brett getting into trouble at school, and you could show that the two of them are having struggles in their lives, outside of, the werewolf attacks. Something the movie does do is have Uncle Ted drop hints that there is something wrong about him, that he has changed. You can keep that, but have it be a bit more ambiguous until you realize, oh, he's talking about being a werewolf, right. I would also clarify what Uncle Ted's mental state is, how much control he has when he's a werewolf, if he's starting to become more werewolf-like in his human form. Like, show this explicitly rather than not explain his changes in behavior. Well, something the movie does do that I'd want to keep is just have the two dog versus werewolf fights, so the pacing's good. So the movie has the first one's about halfway through and the first one's near the end. So if you expand the movie's length to 90 minutes instead of just under 80, then you'd have the first fight be 40 minutes in and then the second fight 80 minutes in. I'd have the encounter where Ted and his girlfriend are attacked by a werewolf would be in flashback, and that would be happening near the end of the movie. So between the two Thor versus werewolf fights, you'd have this extended flashback that shows how this happened. And then you could show Ted's initial efforts to try and stop the condition and his immediate thoughts and feelings on everything. And this one's more of a personal preference, but I'd really push the body horror stuff with the werewolf transformation. Like, the movie has it be like this funny looking morph, and it's not great. But showing it as like this gruesome, like painful thing where his body like breaks and twists open, that's more of a personal preference for how I'd like to see a transformation, but I think the movie would be improved by doing that. And here's the biggest, most glaring problem. Most of the deaths are characters the audience doesn't know, so there's no strong emotional connection. This is a script where every scene is pretty short and brisk and to the point. A lot of them will end on a sentence that kind of like sums up the scene. It's a very ruthless pace. Whatever you need to learn gets said or shown and then just ends. It almost has a pattern to it. You have scene during the day, Thor finding clues, Ted will transform and kill someone, there'll be a shot of the moon, and then you'll see Ted the next morning. And it just does that repeatedly. It's a very formulaic structure. There's nothing inherently bad with a straightforward script or a very efficient script, but it's very much a double-edged sword because the script lacks the meat that a more fleshed out script would have. The formula gets repetitive, the limited locations get repetitive, the small cast gets repetitive. It reminds me a lot of The Fly. They're very different tonally, but both are very bare bones movies with short runtimes. This movie is barely 80 minutes long. Very limited sets and an emphasis on a man's transformation against his will into a monster. But The Fly is a lot better than Bad Moon. The love triangle in The Fly is way more compelling than the family conflict between Uncle Ted and his sister. The characters are way more interesting. The special effects are better and the music is way more memorable. Bad Moon's music, it's by the guy who did Dexter, so it's not like he's a bad composer, it's just not as memorable. The Fly also has a very straightforward script, but it does have more locations, and there is more interpersonal drama between the characters. The transformation is more interesting than simply turning into a werewolf at night. It's a transformation created by a science experiment gone wrong, and it's a gradual process. Slowly losing your mind in a gradual transformation that's irreversible is more interesting than turning into a monster at night. Also, The Fly doesn't even really have a villain until near the end, when Brundlefly goes nuts and tries to come up with his desperate scheme to save his humanity. For most of the movie, it's a horror tragedy, really. If Bad Moon had a more interesting soundtrack, if it had better special effects, if it had better actors and more human drama, it probably would have been more interesting. Then again, there are really interesting ideas mixed in with a generic script that is happy to have generic characters and a formulaic structure, which has a very weak plot and very silly characters and a lot of other issues with it. But it's so goddamn entertaining that you like it anyway. This movie is not trying to be high art, and it is not trying to be a big budget epic. It is a low budget movie that was shot very quickly, and that's totally fine. There is a room in the world for movies like this. There's space for it, and there's a demand for it. I really like it, even though it's got all these problems with it, because the premise is so charming, the dog actor is so likable, and you really support this dog. You watch the movie and you really want him to succeed. Like, you're hooked by the cleverness of the dog protagonist. That's such a clever, weird, interesting, and thought-provoking main character to have in a horror movie. I can't really think of many other movies like this. But Tin Man, should I watch this movie even though you've just pointed out all these flaws and talked about how there's all these problems in it? Yes! This movie is still really goddamn entertaining. And plus, it's the only movie I know of where a dog fights a werewolf twice.